Hi, everyone. Good morning. Thank you to the Ireland U.S. Council for having me. It's a great privilege to be here. I appreciate the kind comments. A couple of things. I just got back a number of weeks ago from Switzerland. I was at the Davos conference, and that was the first time that I've ever attended one of those. What happened, I think, was that they asked me to attend very late in the game, and I think they'd lined up all these Hillary Clinton speakers, and then, oh my God, Donald Trump is going to be the president. I did work for Donald Trump for the 6 months or so before the election as an advisor to Trump, so I got to know him a bit. I thought I'd give you a few reflections on what Donald Trump is like in person and what I expect him to do. And I'd just start by just telling you a couple just quick stories from the campaign trail that I think dovetail on some of the things that Michael was talking about. And let me just start with this. You know, Michael, I think I finally came to the realization of why it was that almost every political pro, every prognosticator, every pollster, with the exception, of course, of the great John McLaughlin, almost everyone had this wrong. Almost everyone did. In fact, a year ago, if I was standing in this room and I told you that Donald Trump was going to be the next president, if it was a year ago today, you would have thrown me out for, smoking marijuana or something like that. I mean, it was, the odds back then a year ago were probably, I looked, actually, there were 3%. And every poll up to the end had Hillary Clinton winning by a fairly safe margin. The pros said that it was an 80-20% race. And so why were the prognosticators so wrong? Why did they have this so wrong? And I was in Tampa about 2 weeks before the election, and I saw a bumper sticker that I think explained everything, Michael. And the bumper sticker said this: vote for Donald Trump. Nobody has to know. Nobody has to know. And I think that really, there's a lot of wisdom in that. There was a hidden Donald Trump voter out there that nobody saw, of people who were, what I saw when I went around the country, especially to places like Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Iowa. By the way, I don't think Donald Trump ever even stepped into the state of New York or California. I mean, he knew that those states were lost. He concentrated on 7 states: North Carolina, Florida, Ohio, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin. And he knew he had to win all of those, and he did. One other kind of quick story that I think explains a lot about the mood of the American people, and that is this, that I was in Ohio. How many of you have ever been to Ohio, by the way? For those of you who are Irish, well, Ohio is a state that, you think of it as an industrial state. You think of Cleveland. Are you from Ohio? Michigan, sorry about that. But Ohio, I'm from Illinois, so I'm a Midwesterner too. But, you think of Ohio as being an industrial state, but actually, if you I flew into Dayton, and the campaign had me go about an hour straight west to the Indiana border. And for those of you who haven't been to that area of the country, and I hadn't actually been to those towns before, it's just one little Mayberry RFD, little rural town after another. And it was so interesting when my driver was taking me to this event, and we were driving for about 45 minutes through these little towns. Most of them didn't even have a McDonald's or even a stoplight. And all I saw, literally for 45 minutes, in front of every house, Trump, 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 Trump. And I even commented to my driver, I said, God, Joey, this is unbelievable. We've been driving now for almost an hour, and I haven't seen one Hillary Clinton sign. And sure enough, we go around a corner, and there about 4 houses down is one of those big blue Hillary signs. Says, oh, never mind, Joey, there's one. So sure enough, we drive a little bit closer, and Joey says, well, Steve, take a closer look at that. And it said Hillary for prison. Now, the reason I mention that is what Michael was describing, I think, is so true. This country is extremely culturally divided right now. If you got out of the cities and went into the rural areas outside of the suburbs, that was Trump country. Completely. And in fact, when you talk to people in those states like Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, said, I think it's something a lot of people in Washington didn't understand. They'd say, when I debate people in Washington about Trump versus Hillary, and I was a Trump person, they'd say, why are voters so angry? What do they have to be angry about? Everything's so wonderful in America. And one of the things I really discovered is, you know what? If you went to places like Flint, Michigan, or you went places like York, Pennsylvania, or you went to places like Rockford, Illinois, they weren't feeling the love. They didn't see, in fact, they would almost be insulted when I'd say, how's the recovery going for you? You know what they would say, Michael? They'd say, what recovery are you talking about? Because these are places that were sort of left behind. And I think that's sort of the answer of why this election went the way it did. So with that said, I wanted to just give you a few remarks about the economy in terms of the direction where I think it's going. I'll just open with a lead, which is I'm extremely bullish right now. I think the outlook for not just the United States, but the rest of the world, exiting this malaise that the world has been in for the last 10 years, I think there's a high probability that that's going to happen. And it's because if the United States, for the first time in 10 years, starts to get policy right, I'm a big believer that, let's face it, the United States is the hub of the world economy. When we get it right, the rest of the world starts to get it right. When we get it wrong, as we have in the last 10 years, the rest of the world tends to dovetail on our mistakes. So let me just show you just a few charts to kind of explain what's going on with the economy. Mr. Moore, could you please? So this is the first one. And the energy revolution is very important to understand, especially in the United States, why it is the United States grew at all for the last 10 years, because it turns out without the shale oil and gas revolution, which has been a game changer, not just for the United States, but for the rest of the world, it has changed the energy outlook almost with the blink of an eye for the next century. You can see the orange line is employment in the United States for all industries. You can see the recession, and then you can see it was a really flimsy recovery. It wasn't until 2014 the United States regained every job that was lost. Look at the boom in the oil and gas industry. And what this is saying, essentially, is without the shale oil and gas revolution, we probably wouldn't have gotten out of the recession at all. Now, if you look at the tail end of that, you can see the big drop-off. And, of course, that's because what has happened is when you have a big increase in supply, as we have in the United States, what happens to the price? It falls. And so there's actually been a drop-off in production and employment in the oil industry, but I believe it will continue to be at an upward scale for a long time to come. And just to cut to the chase, I just wrote a book about this, that if the United States gets it right, and I think this is one area where I think you couldn't find an issue where Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama were completely on the opposite sides of the spectrum than energy. Donald Trump is just all in on American energy. He wants to produce American oil. He wants to produce American natural gas. He wants to produce American coal. We have more of this than any other country in the world. And as I used to tell him in our meetings, Donald, if we get this right, if we produce American energy, we can be the Saudi Arabia of the next century. And we can. We have more oil, gas, and coal than any other country in the world. So that's a good news story. I think it's just the beginning of an incredible revolution. If you look at the next chart, this just shows what's happened to the price, obviously, and this has been a big, essentially like a big tax cut for the American consumer and consumers around the world. As the price of energy falls, that's really, really good news for consumers and for industries around the world, because energy is the master resource. If energy prices fall, it means that everything else, manufacturing, construction, technology, all of these can produce their products at a lower cost. So that's a very good news story, and expect a lot more of that. I think you're going to see a big, big increase in American energy production in the next 4 or 5 years. If you show the next chart, one of the big problems with the U.S. economy is government debt. Today, the president came out with his budget. What's interesting about this chart is if you look at household debt and corporate debt over the last 10 years, it's actually been pretty impressive. That one of the reasons I'm very bullish on the U.S. economy is corporations and households have cleaned up their balance sheet big time. The amount of debt that's held by corporations and households is very low now. In fact, corporations are hoarding a lot of cash. They're in great shape with respect to their balance sheets. The only balance sheet that doesn't look good in America, Michael, is the government balance sheet, which is a disaster. We've increased our debt by $10 trillion. I think the only way you're going to get out of that debt crisis is by growth, by having much faster growth, and I think we can do that. If you'll show the next chart, this shows why Americans are so angry. This has not been a good recovery. This is the dark blue line is the recovery under Obama, 15%. So it's been, to give Obama his due, it's been a durable recovery. It's been a long recovery, but it's just been an incredibly flimsy recovery. So the economy has grown only by about 1.9% now on a compounded basis for the last 7 years. And if you compare that, the light blue line is the average recovery. That's been about twice as fast. And then the Reagan recovery was about two and a half times faster. I believe we can get on that red trajectory if we get it right with regulatory reduction, tax reduction, and a pro-American energy policy. If you show the next chart, I just thought I'd show you this because I am optimistic. I tell investment clients and so on, I just think the economy is ready for a big boom. And I wanted to show you what a boom looks like. And if you look at the blue line, that's simply something everyone in this room is familiar with. It's the S&P 500. And and by the way, the green line is just the S&P 500 adjusted for inflation. And you can see, it's kind of interesting. Look at the green line. The worst period for the stock market in the last 100 years, other than the Great Depression, was the 1970s, when we had very high inflation and very high tax rates. You can see that from the period 1968 to 1982, the stock market lost 65% of its value adjusted for inflation. I think we can all agree that when stocks lose 2/3 of their value relative to inflation over 12 years, that's a ferociously bear market. And then the way I like to put it, if you look at the blue line again and you look at that upward trajectory, the way that I like to put it is the clouds dispersed, the sun came out, and God gave America Ronald Reagan, and you saw the biggest boom in the history of the world. What you're looking at in that upward trajectory for that 20-year period from 1981 to 2000. By the way, the economy exploded under Reagan. It grew even faster under Bill Clinton, a Democrat who was a genuine new Democrat who moved to balance the budget, advance free trade, cut capital gains taxes, and so on. That was the era of Reagan. It was the era of Milton Friedman, and you can see what happened to worldwide. And by the way, it wasn't just growth and wealth accumulation in the United States. It happened all over the world. And I guess what I'm here to tell you is I think we could be at the start of another one of these big booms, not just in the United States, but around the world. By the way, if you look at the tail end of that chart, you can see the two big recessions that we had in the United States when the economy collapsed in 1999 and 2000, when we had the dot-com revolution, bubble burst, and then, of course, the real estate crisis that led to what we now call the Great Recession. If you show the next chart, I'm almost done here. Taxes. Taxes is a big deal. Again, President Trump is releasing his budget today. One of the centerpieces of his plan is to cut the tax rates as much as possible. This is I love this chart. The orange line is the top tax rate in the United States. The green line is the share of taxes paid by the top 1%. You can see what happened in the Reagan years when the tax rates came way down from 70% to 28%. And then look at that. I mean, most people are shocked by this. I showed this to the Senate Republicans a few weeks ago. Their jaws dropped when they saw this. The tax rates came down. Look at what happened to the share of taxes paid by the rich. That is called the Laffer curve, that when you cut tax rates, oftentimes you get more revenues, not less. And boy, did it happen in spades in the 1980s. I think we can do that again. If you'll show the next chart, John F. Kennedy, it's just my favorite quote. I think it's true of the United States. As in Ireland, every country is a paradoxical truth. When rates are too high and revenues are too low, the soundest way to raise the revenues in the long run is to cut the rates now. Boom. It's really that simple. We've got to do that in the United States. Finally, I'll just show you one other chart. This is the heart of it, and I'll just end with this. I think Donald Trump, and I think most Americans get this, that our business tax system in the United States is a total abomination. It is, you couldn't come up with anything stupider than the way the United States taxes our businesses. And it's amazing that we grow at all, by the way, given the handicap that we put on American businesses. The black line across the top is the U.S. business tax rate. I know, Jack, you worked on this when you were in Congress about how do we get this down. It is so amazing to me we didn't fix this problem 10, 15 years ago. But the red pillars are what's happened in the rest of the world. And you all know, by the way, that Ireland is the country that has led the world in business tax rate reductions. So you can see what's happening there in that chart is the rest of the world is engaged in Reaganomics, right? The rest of the world is aggressively cutting their tax rates to become more competitive, and it has worked. And by the way, the country that they're trying to steal jobs and capital and companies from is the United States. So you can see there that the rest of the world has cut their corporate tax rate basically in half, whereas we've done nothing. So today, and by the way, this is a little out of date. Today, the average tax rate around the world is about 22%. We're at 40%. That doesn't work anymore. It's like what I call this is a 20% Head Start program for every country that America competes with. We are seeing a bleeding of jobs out of the United States. And by the way, one of the destinations that a lot of these American companies are going to is Ireland. You know this. Ireland has become, a lot of our drug companies have moved to Ireland, and many manufacturing companies. You charge 12.5%. We pay 40. We charge 40. It's not that complicated, right? Only politicians couldn't seem to understand this. And as Art Laffer, my mentor, likes to say, you get two countries Country A has a high tax rate, country B has a low rate. What happens over time? All other things equal, you get a migration of companies and capital out of A to B. That's what's happening. It's happening day after day. We've seen companies like Medtronic, Pfizer, Johnson Control, Burger King just moved to Canada. This is a crisis in the United States. I keep telling Donald Trump, you know, the alarm bell should be going off in Washington, D.C. There's something wrong here. And I do think we're going to get this fixed. We're going to get that rate down to hopefully about 20%. And if we do that, I do think you're going to see a magnet effect. I think a lot of those companies that have left the United States are coming back to the United States. I don't think they're going to leave Ireland, by the way, because Ireland's still going to be the lowest tax rate country in the world. The single greatest comparative advantage in the world that Ireland has today is your 12.5% corporate tax rate. It is a huge magnet for capital around the world. By the way, you know why Ireland is such a great place to invest in, right? Because the capital is always Dublin. Terrible joke. Sorry about that. That's a bad one, isn't it, Michael? Anyway, so I'm just here to say I think we are going to cut our rate. That means we're going to be catching up to Ireland. Game is on, and we'll see how countries like Ireland and European countries respond to that. But again, I do think you're going to see a big boom, and I think we're going to see America made great again. So thank you very much.